Hello and welcome everybody to the F show on writing, writers, storytellers. We have a wonderful group of people who write either for film, for theater, for children, for themselves, for fun. And I'd like to start with Mara. Welcome, Mara. Before we
Thank
start with,
you.
and we'd like to thank you for your work on Memory is a Weapon as well. Your work is just absolutely beautiful. I've been to the Edinburgh Festival and I've seen you in performance. So I'm so happy that you are with us today. But before we start, Justine will show us a little clip of your work.
And when the young man with the furrowed brow peered in, the shadow man began to cast his spell. It wants to take the good, the just, but you can stop it. Yes, you must.
Wow, wow, wow. That was just beautiful. Tell us about your storytelling journey.
So yes, I've been doing the performance storytelling now for, the decades are now moving. So about 12 years or so professionally. And I'll start from the beginning. I started when I was expecting my first daughter. And I grew up with storytelling in Kenya. And then when we moved to Scotland, all the storytelling stopped. But when I was pregnant and I knew that I really wanted this child to engage with its African heritage, I figured that the best way to do that was through stories. And so I thought, I know lots of stories. I couldn't find them in the books that I was looking at. So I wrote a story and I found an illustrator and I set up a publishing company and I printed 1,000 copies. And then my friends and family, they all bought copies. And I still had 900 and something left. And so, yes, I needed to sell these books. So I would hire halls and centers and I would invite people to come and listen to the story in the hope that they would buy the book. And it was through that process that somebody came and invited me to the storytelling center in Scotland. And it was there that I discovered that storytelling was a thing. I didn't actually realize that it had existed in such a way before. And so the book kind of became a very side thing and I became a storyteller. And because I started with stories for young children, that carried for a little while. But then I think I realized the power that stories have and the value that they have and how we really have a misunderstanding of the power that these stories have. And also we have a misunderstanding of what storytelling can be. It has quite an old-fashioned perception. It's something that old people do to entertain little children. And actually, it's such a dynamic art form. I'm so passionate about it. And you can talk about so many different issues, very complex, very complicated, very profound things. But when you tell a story, you go through this roller coaster of emotion. Like with Blood and Gold, it was looking at the legacy of colonialism and slavery. So a very complicated history, certainly Scotland's relationship with colonialism and slavery. And quite a taboo subject. Is something that people don't like to talk about. And oftentimes if you start talking about the legacy, which often includes racism, then it puts barriers right up. But if you're exploring these issues through myth and through fantasy, it allows people to engage with them on a very different level. And I also feel that stories have a way of hitting people where they are at. So you might have a certain message that you're trying to deliver, but a good story will have so many different layers. And I think that's the beauty of it. It's your message might not hit home, another message might hit home. So you could tell one story to 100 people and each one of them will be impacted in a very different way. So it's a very individual experience, yet at the same time it's a shared experience when you're doing that live face to face storytelling. So for me, it's such a beautiful, rich art form that you can cover the most complex subjects, and you can talk about these with an audience that might include 5-year-olds, that might include teenagers, that might include people of all ages. It's not something that is exclusive or has limitations and boundaries. And also, because it's in the moment, you can draw the audience in, so you can bring them in so they are part of the telling of the story. And in 5 years time, you might have that audience and they'll say, oh, do you remember the story about this? And the same person and their friend will be, no, the story wasn't about that. It was about something else. So people bring their own experiences and their own histories and their own journeys into the listening and the sharing and that personal experience of a story. So it's such a powerful thing. And I guess, you know, what I would really like is that storytelling just becomes this mainstream activity, where people would just gather and sit and tell stories. Because now when we get together, it's a lot of talk in little groups, and it's very rare that you actually have a focused point where somebody is telling a story, and then maybe people can engage and discuss and explore that story and what it might mean to people. And storytelling is a very forgiving art form as well, and audiences want the storyteller to succeed, so it actually makes our job quite easy, I guess, but at the same time challenging, because you know there are moments when an audience might be listening and then something really jars, and then they throw a question out at you, and then you have to respond in a certain way. But oftentimes, you know, I think the stories that I love telling are these very, very complex stories and quite difficult stories that will hit people at different levels. So that is a very kind of brief journey into storytelling. Certainly in the future, you know, one of the things that I'm working on just now, I'm working with a theatre in Edinburgh called the Lyceum, and we're putting together a story. It's inspired by the boxer Anthony Joshua, who is, you know, a famous British boxer, but it's telling his story from a very different perspective. We're telling his story from through his mother's eyes, and by doing that, we kind of bring the audience in because they know about Anthony Joshua, but you are telling the mother's story. So with that, it's her journey from Nigeria to Britain. It's themes of immigration, it's themes of intercultural family. So she is raising her children with these strong Nigerian values, but they're growing up in London, surrounded by a whole load of other journeys, and sometimes in families that cultural clash can be quite difficult. And it's really not an issue that a lot of people explore, a lot of people discuss quite openly, but it's something that so many thousands, millions of families live with on a daily basis. And so I find that looking at a story from another perspective is a really interesting way of doing things. And because I love myth and I love how it encompasses all humanity, how you can really draw people in regardless of the story. So if we are bringing myth into the story and we're talking about the demons of London, the demons of London might be gang violence, drugs, knives, but in a small fishing village somewhere on the other side of the world, you know, it could be a very, very different demon that people are dealing with. So stories have a way of just, you know, touching everybody. But yes, that is my journey in storytelling.
Thank you, Mara. And I guess it's the immediacy of the audience that you are right there in front of them.
Absolutely.
So Yussi, we want to come to you, Yussi, and we do have just the cover of your first book, but I'd like to call you the accidental writer. Somebody, I think, as we are friends and we come from a long history of friendship, of being young people together, very long time in Cape Town, really enjoying the good life. We were all fascinated when you started writing on Facebook. You just started telling these stories. So tell us about this journey. Justine, could you please just show us the first cover page, and then Yussi, you can talk to, and then you can also go straight into your excerpt.
Okay. So with those guys, it started in 2018, why I call myself an accidental author is, in 2018, I had this groin injury from a squash game, squash injury. And I ended up on this acupuncture bed in a doctor's office. Now remember this, I've never written in my life before. I know a lot of you are not going to be happy with me. I did not read a lot either. So I was laying on this bed with needles in the groin area and the head area, and I was just so bored. I was staring at these toilet paper stacked, this toilet paper stacked up, and I thought to myself, I'm not going to lay here for 45 minutes staring at toilet paper. I thought, let me just take my phone, 28th of October 2018, and I started actually writing a story of what was happening in that room with myself. And I just added a little bit of spice to the story, the Cape Town thing that we do. And I posted it on Facebook. That was the first time I ever wrote a story. And when I got home later that evening, I saw a whole lot of likes, laughs, and people said, oh my gosh, you need to write books. I thought to myself, oh my gosh, guys, don't get ahead of yourself here. And 10 days later, I wrote 7 stories. And a week after those 10 days, I got a call, a friend of mine, actually, who I'm sitting at now, she sent 3 of those stories to three publishers. And we got a call from a Johannesburg publisher, and they said, hi, Mr. Daniels, we would like you to write a book for us. And I said, oh, okay, someone's thanking me. Because I knew nothing, absolutely nothing about writing. And then they flew someone down the next day, they signed me, and I wrote my first book, that was Living Colors. And that book came out the 1st of June last year. And the first week, it was #1 in 5 exclusive bookstores. Now, Exclusive Books is our biggest bookstore in South Africa. And by the 3rd week, we were #2 in the country. The book was #2 in the top 100. And it just went crazy and it went viral. By the 3rd month, the book was a bestseller. I think it surprised me more than anybody else. But I think the people just enjoyed the journey of me taking them right inside my story and where I came from, you know. So we grew up in the hood on the Cape Flats. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it was tough growing up in this area where we were segregated and we were just basically thrown there and left for dead, really left for dead. So first book was done, and then I decided, people said, you need to write the second book. And I thought, okay, let me just do it. Let me just please my people. And I wrote my second book the 1st of June. I wrote that one out, but I self-published this one. And the 2 books are actually in the top 10, 15 months later at Exclusive Books, so they're both in there. And it's such an amazing feeling that people are actually supporting me now. I'm loving the support. But as you know, Fidos, I'm also very involved with the community. So what I did with that first book was I took it to school. Last year, I went to 20 schools. And I told my story to these kids to motivate these kids, because I went to the schools in the more poorer areas, the areas where we were thrown back into that. And the kids really took to my story. So much so that some of the parents are messaging me now and saying, Yusuf, you know what? My kids doing your book as their review for school or their oral. And for me, that was kind of job halfway done, you know. We have a very, very poor culture, reading culture in South Africa. The average sales that an author makes in South Africa is between 600 and 1,000 books in his lifetime. That's how sad it is here. So if you sell 5,000 books, you've done pretty decently, I would think. The second book is doing well. And
can you read us? Can you read an excerpt for us from your second book?
Okay, I'm going to read an excerpt for you guys from the second book, which is called Living Lekker, from Mitchell's Plain to Aeroplane. So Mitchell's Plain is one of the little areas where I grew up, the hood, like they would say, but I became a flight attendant. So I always say your circumstances should never dictate your destination. That's what that means. So this story is it's a short excerpt. It's called How Sport Changed My Life. So remember, I'm a 14-year-old kid growing up in Mitchell's Plain in this really rough area. So it goes like this. My circumstances and my situation growing up and surrounded by gangsterism was not going to tell me who I am and what my limitations are. There was a way out, and I grabbed it with both hands. I played in so many tournaments, and these were baseball tournaments, by the way. So many tournaments all over the country, and I loved it. I got to don the green and gold. It felt amazing. This is when my overseas travel started. Baseball gave me hope and a new purpose in life. Yes, I am one of the fortunate ones. Not everybody got out. Some friends even lost their lives to gangsterism. I am thankful that I got out. God put his hand, steered me in the right direction, and made me the person that I am today. I still made the Western Province A-side when I was 40 years old. I now play Masters baseball, and I'm still going strong 36 years later. Thank you, baseball, for rescuing me from what could have been a disaster. Thank you, baseball, for teaching me so many life lessons. Thank you, baseball, for the friendships you have given me. Thank you, baseball, for possibly saving my life. My advice to parents out there, let your kids play sport and support them. So watch them play and cheer them on. It could just save us or change their lives. True story. Thanks.
I think it's important to say, you know, the title Living Lekker, because in South Africa, it's a combination of an English Afrikaans word, and we always like to say local is lekker. So what is local is tasty and beautiful. I love your story, you see, because you have really proven, as you said, 2 years ago, you were not a writer, and you just suddenly took to not even pen to paper. You took your mobile phone and you started clicking.
Sorry, guys, I apologize. I'm getting dirty looks here.
We will continue this conversation, definitely. Peggy, I'd like to come to you. Now, I've met Peggy, I think it was 1995, Peggy, when we were together in Australia for the World Summit on Media for Children. Mm-hmm. And this kind of connection, because you really came out of the media world in broadcasting. You worked for the biggest broadcaster probably in the world in terms of India and the numbers of people. But then you've transitioned into writing. And so I'd like you to tell us a little bit about that journey and then talk to us about the books that you have written.
Okay, so, I'm not getting my face on here. Anyway, well, it all started exactly as that. My working in, first I was an academic, and then I moved into television. So there was a little bit of that. There was a background in working on the community I came from, which is Indians who were trafficked to the West Indies to work on the plantations. And so I had done work on the language. And then I moved into television and got excited at the thought of what you could do with cameras, what you could do with editing, and how you could plan shots and everything. And then I had this story, which was drawn from all the research work I did about one woman who made that ship journey to Trinidad. And I kept thinking, when will I ever be able to make it into a film? And times were changing. It was more and more difficult to get into film work, to get sponsorship, because tapes were coming in from the US. For $20, you could get a program. So why would you pay production costs? So eventually what I did, thought about it, worried about it. And then one night, which is a magical time when it rains at sunset, you get your best idea. Why don't I just write a book? Because I'm completely free. And then I began to see that if I wrote it as a book, I could get a lot of inner things going on, people's thoughts, a different journey. Although the first 2 chapters were completely in shots in my mind. So I was able to just follow the shots and write. So to some extent, I still write a bit like I'm writing a script, or like I'm actually writing a short division. And then at the other time, one has to push into imagination about things that happened quite a while ago. So my first book was called Jahajin, which is a woman who went on the ship, one of the first Indians who went to the West Indies, to Trinidad. My second one was more controversial because Gujarat 2000 had happened, and I had been involved in helping young boys who had been arrested on charges of terrorism as a linguist to discredit the forced confessions that they had made. And I had wanted to write a book on Gujarat, and I'd had an idea of a young boy, and I put it all together, my own experience in the courtroom, and the idea of the boy too, and it came together as my own experience. And then when I was finished writing it, somebody said, oh, it's not really a novel because it's all real. And they said, I'll prove it to you. And a boy wrote to me and said, I'm probably the boy that you were, whose files you were looking at and who you were defending all the time. And I remember you. And you actually got me quite right in the story about my parents and everything. So that was there. Right now, I'm in the process waiting for a fourth one to come. The third one is an allegory about the whole process of filmmaking and what it's like to be a woman and to have people constantly trying to gaslight you, try to take it all away from you, and how you struggle through. But the fourth one is out of all of that. It's not in fiction, because I thought there's another story, the story of all the migrations into India. And as a linguist, how can we track who came, when they came, how much of the contribution into the languages now in India, because I'm a linguist, is preserved from what the original women spoke who came out of Africa 70,000 years ago, and how much has been added by waves of men coming as migrants. That book is supposed to come out next year, early next year. So I have all of these things. It struck me that we already have two themes of things to do with slavery and so going on here. I think Mara's first opening thing was on a dramatic piece on slavery. I thought that if you want me to read something out of my first book, it could be something that I remember as a story that we'd always been told as children, which grew in my mind. And it's a it's a short thing where, and I actually found later that I went to a conference and somebody mentioned, here is an Indian who actually didn't take oppression lying down. He actually fought back. And I said, oh, that's my great, great, great grandfather. And I was able to tell them much more about it. This is a scene where clearly something unusual is about to happen. This is my ancestor on an estate in Trinidad. Let's see if I can just read it and tell you.
Sure, please.
It is a scene I can so easily conjure from my childhood memories. I know this story well. A February night on Esperanza Estate, a sickle moon. Some of the cane is still standing, but almost half of the crop is cut. The fields near the overseer's bungalows are desolate, burnt, and hacked to pieces. If you walk towards the overseer's bungalows, you would be able to see forever into the distance. The future is not hidden, but that makes no difference. What has to happen will happen. A wronged Thakur in a room in the Kuli barracks removes his pagari, his turban, and prepares for his own doom, stirred by a terrible sense of duty born of Rajput chivalry. He walks out into the night with his cutlass in hand, more certain of what he is about to do than he has ever been about anything in his life up to now. He has to kill a man and destroy his own future in the process. He has no choice. Afterwards, he vanished into the same cane traces where Sunaria had gone with her friends, his daughter. But his story did not end because they could not catch him. He had escaped, and he became the stuff of legend. He would appear suddenly out of a cane field and ask a poor ahir for some of the milk that he had just milked from his buffalo. Or he would appear at a farmer's hut after dark and be asked to share the evening meal with his family. Many Indians saw him, but no one reported him. So it's an unusual story because all you hear about is how, well, even the Indian government, constantly saying how wretched we were, how miserable, how unable to do anything for ourselves, how we basically took the jobs that the slaves from Africa had just left. They were freed. And here's something which everybody remembered because it was a case where someone fought back and killed the overseer. And he actually went out to do it and nobody was able to stop him because it was almost like some sort of a right which everybody on the estate understood. And it was in the process of happening. So this was a book that,
Did you say that you also have a children's book?
I have children's stories, but not written like that. I do something different these days, because in Zoom, you can't teach music. And that's what I'm employed to do. You can't. There's an audio lag, which we aren't feeling. But what I do is I get on a situation like this, pull up a blank sheet of paper, and we start writing songs together. The lyrics, and here and there you can just block something, paste it, shift it to another spot, and at the end of a class, what you have is a song. And if they're like class 4 is working on money, so I took a Miriam Makeba song and said, okay, can we do something this? And you know, it's the lyrics are not going to be in a South African language, but can we use this as a model? And the kids just start throwing things, say, okay, these 2 words rhyme. Can we work them together? And we make things up together.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you so much. Ahmed, we are coming to you right now. Thank you for joining us all the way in Italy. I know you're based between Cairo and New York City, and I'm sure with COVID, it must be quite a daunting situation that you find yourself in. So we welcome you, and we'd like to first just show the trailer of one of the films that you have been involved in, and then you'll tell us your story.
الكوتش اللي باش من لف بشوارعك يحرم عليه يبوس ارض غيرك. الو 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 خد يدي يا ابن الكذب انت يالا ولا بالليل ندى بتقول لك عطشان.
اخرة صبرتني يا عزة، الناس خدتها السبت والحد.
طبعا في حد مستخدم سحر اسود. دول 3 زلطات لازم يترموا في ال3 مسطحات المائيه اللي موجوده في مصر. دول ان شاء الله كافيين بكسر السحر.
ايه ده؟ قلت لك 3 زلطات برضه؟ امسك.
انت هنا ندى هتخش الحمام.
مش واخد بالك اصلا النادي دي عريانه ملط.
خلصتي؟
يا ندى
وانت فيك ايه لا مؤاخذة؟
انا بسمع اصوات غريبه، انا بس اللي بسمعها.
حط على ايه دول؟
اصل ندى قالت نكته، ما فهمتهاش ولا ايه؟
Thank you, Ahmed. Ahmed, as you tell us the story, I'm also curious to know about the different languages in which you obviously have to write, because if it's Arabic and English, and if there is a mixture. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. I mainly write in Arabic, and sometimes I have to translate my own scripts from Arabic to English. If we are approaching a producer or a financier somewhere around the world, which happens quite often because most of the films that I'm involved in are independent films, and usually we get funding from France or from funds sometimes in Europe, sometimes in the Middle East. So I do write in Arabic and in English, but most of the films that I do are based in Egypt. And you are currently writing something for the Alguna Film Festival. Is that what you were saying? I'm now writing a film and also producing it. And this film will be part of the Guna Film Festival for the development platform. So the film has not been shot, been shot yet. We are still in the second draft of the script. Are you going to pitch it to us? Not very ready with a pitch on this one, but I can give you an idea. It's a Hamlet adaptation set in the informal settlements of Cairo, and the director, who is also my co-writer on that project, his name is Ahmed Fawzi Saleh. I should mention him. He's a lovely director. So we thought, why not take Hamlet, a play that we both love and we are very familiar with, and why not take it into a contemporary setting of what's happening in Egypt now, make it a piece that is completely anti-patriarchy, talk about urban renewal that's happening currently in our city, and also using the director's Sufi background, because our Hamlet is called Ahmed, and he is a Sufi, and that's also part of why everyone around him think that he's mad, because of his belief in Sufism. And we've actually made an effort also to elevate some of the other characters, like Ophelia and Hamlet's mother, making them more integrated in the story and more of a powerful and not very passive characters like they are in the original work. And yeah, that's in a nutshell.
Thank you. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Market Theatre, which is quite a prominent theatre in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the lockdown, they've actually been doing Shakespeare, but they're having the women play all the very important roles of the Shakespearean characters. So almost this kind of thing of turning it on its head, because the meaty, the more juicy characters were always kind of written for men. So it'll be fascinating to see what you eventually come up with. Thank you, Ahmed. Your work is phenomenal. People absolutely love your storytelling. Thank you so much. Professor Anita, we come to you now, and we are so happy to have you amidst us and with the work that you have been doing. We do have a PowerPoint to show, and also the cover of the book, so that as we show the PowerPoint, you can talk to us through the work that you do. Thank you and welcome. Justine, could we see that, please?
Yes, it's very great to be here. When I finished high school, my auntie said to me, I want to read your book. And I thought, what do you mean, read my book? But it wasn't until I got into college that I began to write poems and write other type of manuscript. And so this Catherine Dunham, an African-American cultural icon, was actually my master's thesis. And if you ever had trouble in college, after I had finished all my coursework, my professor sat my thesis for over a year, and it made me doubt myself. It made me doubt my writing abilities and so forth and so on. And so after a year, he decided to call me in without any revisions and tell me that my writing was so great that I would have to look into the future to understand how magnificent my work was, that I did a cross between anthropology and history, and that as we look into the future, we will see other students come behind me and actually copy my writing style. And because he had sat on my thesis for over a year, I just thought he was just blowing smoke upon me, just to get me out, because I was tired of him and he was tired of me. But nevertheless, I went ahead to publish this book, and just like he had predicted, I did very well in sales, and I also use it in my own college class, as well as college class around the nation. But I just want to read a short sample of the dance in the rhythm of life. Jungle jazzing, orient wriggling, civilized stepping, shake that thing, sweet dancing of primitive joy, perverse pleasure, prostitute ways, many adored variations of the rhythm, savage, barbaric, refined, ethereal rhythm of the mysterious, magical, magnificent, the dance divine of life. Oh, shake that thing. Catherine Dunham believed that dance involved the physical, mental, and spiritual. For her, dance is a language that speaks from all three aspects, to and from the dancer. As it speaks through the dancer to the audience on the earthly physical plane, there's another plane on which the dance can be communicated. That is from on high, the spiritual realm, or as some would suggest, from the gods themselves. Catherine Dunham danced and developed technique that was from a different drum. As a pioneer in modern dance, she sought to elevate not only the masses of African American youth, but also to elevate all races by creating performances rooted in African religion, dance, and culture. Even famous choreographers, including George Ballaccini, gravitated to the technique and sent his dancers to study the unique form of dance under Catherine Dunham. Lisa McCall, dance instructor at Wayne State University and former Catherine Dunham dancer, said that the technique was best prepared dancers for all disciplines. Being a Dunham trained dancer often was the competitive edge that dancers needed to advance their careers. And one of the things that I want to point out about Catherine Dunham and why I utilize her life to talk about spirituality and the language of dance. She also utilized dance as an art form for social transformation. During the time that she came up when racism was very heavy around the world, she was also able to stop performances to get the companies to align with her to have audiences that reflected her complexion. So not only is dance a language, art, and beauty to behold and to participate in, it is also a form of social transformation. And that is why I utilize her life to talk about these things in a historical way, as well as the anthropology, the study of how the actual dance was transported into the Americas throughout slavery. Throughout my journey of lecturing around the world, I find that as an African American, often we feel that we have been separated from our culture. She was able to preserve the culture outside of Africa. And now I have an opportunity to go into Africa and talk about this. And one of the things that I found was so amazing that in some African cultures, they also have lost that art. And so by it being preserved in the diaspora, we're able to share it back to Africa, making us whole once again.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. So now we can really kind of open up in terms of conversation. And you see, I want to start with you because as the youngest, I'm saying youngest in terms of writing, because you just started, you know, as you said, very recently, but you also had an interest in possibly live theater or maybe film. And because Mara is here and Ahmed is here, I wondered whether you wanted to have, you know, either question to them or get some kind of inspiration.
Yeah, Ahmed, firstly, Mara, I love what you did on stage there. Very interesting. And then Ahmed, that film, by the way, I'm definitely going to watch that film that you just showed earlier. I had a few laughs when I saw it earlier. So I'm quite new at this game, like Firdous says, and the Baxter Theatre is one of the big theatres in South Africa. They're going to actually turn both my books into production within the next few months. So there's something there, and it's exciting for me. I see you guys, you've been doing it for so long. This is going to be my first time. I don't know what to expect. What do I do? Do I just take it in? Is the director, obviously, apparently the director is very important to have here. I don't know, how did he decide on the director? Because apparently I'm involved now, right? In co-directing. I don't even know what to expect. What can I expect, basically? in theatre.
Ahmed, let's go for it. Ahmed, tell him what to do. You're a writer and you've got your co-director.
Are you interested to develop your stories into films or theater? Is that what direction?
So I've been approached by both.
Okay.
I've been approached by people for production on theater, and I've been approached by people for film, to take the story into film.
The question is, would you like to be involved in the script writing process, or that's something you have to decide first?
I think I would. Who better than my experiences? So I think who better to be involved?
You know, there is no like right way or wrong way to do this. It just depends, because like some writers, they love to adapt their own work into film, and some writers would prefer to keep a distance and maybe have someone else write the script, which is but it depends. There are wonderful novelists who wrote amazing screenplays, so there is no right or wrong way to do this. But if you want to be involved, it might be worth it, especially if you don't have experience with script writing.
Yeah.
Team up with a director.
Okay.
Or even a co-writer, and then you have the power of the story, and they can maybe come in with the skills, the technical skills, of the script writing. That might be useful. Or if you wanna go the extra mile and maybe just go ahead, write the script, and then maybe hire someone else who can look at it and give you feedback, and that can also be another way to do it.
Perfect. Thanks. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Mara, because yours is live, do you have any suggestions? I would also like you to refer to your own work, because it's just incredible.
Yes. I mean, when it comes to live, I guess the difference with the storytelling and the film, because in lockdown I've been experimenting also with writing scripts, and with storytelling it's quite linear. There's a chronology which you don't need to have when you're in film, because you can play with time and space and have multiple stories happening simultaneously, whereas with storytelling it tends to be one story throughout. But with Blood and Gold, I've worked for longer shows, like an hour. It's difficult to maintain, or I have to use a lot more theatrical elements with the storytelling when I'm creating an hour-long show. And so I brought in a director, but I think it's really important to know the work of the director. So you find somebody that you like the things that they have done before, or somebody who aligns with your style or with your way of thinking, or somebody who has just somebody that you like. And it doesn't have to be somebody who has experienced the same life as you, but just somebody who gets you and understands what it is that you're trying to say, because that is going to influence the outcome of what the final production is going to be. So I would really just, and it's important to actually make sure you get the right person, because if you don't, you're going to be watching it and thinking, no, that's not my story, that's not my work. And it's and sometimes it's a gift that we might not get the chance to do that again. So it's important to get it right the first time. So that's my advice.
Thanks, Mara.
Peggy, I'd like to just come back to you, Peggy, because your work is so diverse. You've gone from film into writing, into novels, into storytelling, and you work with children. Where do you find your most? Where's your love? What do you enjoy the most?
Oh. That's hard to say, because there's so many things. I love painting. I suddenly get an idea. I think I go through periods where I'm doing one thing. Right now, during the lockdown, I suddenly started cutting up all sorts of cloth and making my own clothes, and everything had to be different. I made up songs, recorded a few. Like there's the issue of the migrants who all walked back to the villages in India because nothing was there for them during the lockdown. And I just wrote a song in their dialect and sang it.
Can you sing it? Can you sing it for us?
Or right now? Oh, but it's not in English.
That's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Remember the words. Sabka firman talabandi. Sati sun, sati sun, sati sun, sun, sun. सबका फरमान सब घरे कैद हो जाओ Mahamari hai. Basically, the start of the proclamation that there's going to be a lockdown. Na koi bhat, there's no rice. Na koi roti, no roti. Sati chal, 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 chal. Na ko no khaika, no food. This is in our dialect. Asagro bhukhi bhuk, jina muskil hai. Now, it's very strange for people to hear me singing in the voice of a migrant who's walking. And it goes on, developing, taking it out of course, Bella Ciao, where also after death, what happens when you die. And then, of course, it gets very political. And so I've told kids, I can't teach it to you, but here you can look for me on YouTube, and they did.
Well, we should look for you on YouTube. Justine, can you find Peggy on YouTube so we can
That's very easy. But that's very easy
so
because
let's get a
Peggy Moore on
yours.
YouTube. If you have a Gmail account, you have a YouTube channel.
Yes, we're going to find you. Anita, as we come back to you again, I love the anthropology. I mean, I think the depth, but it's also your connection, I think, with Africa. When we, you know, it's always this thing about Africa is a country. I think you must have seen that when we talk about the continent and just how many different countries. I mean, there's Ahmed in Egypt and I'm sitting in South Africa, almost, you know, opposing parts of this continent. Where do you find your love and the connection with the continent? Which parts?
Wow. Well, I've actually traveled to 28 different countries in Africa. And I love South Africa. It was coming in as #1. But when it comes to my ancestry, I actually wrote a short story about my journey to find my people. And that story turned out to be a prophetic story because when I did my DNA, I found my roots in these 3 countries, the Congo, the Cameroon, and Angola. And right now, Cameroon has my heart. I dream about Cameroon, and that's actually my 3rd book. It's called Dancing My Destiny, The Other Side of Life, where I'm an avid dreamer, and I keep notes. I have tons and tons of notebooks of dreams, but this one dream in particular was really prophetic for my life. I received it when I was only 6 years old. And it wasn't until I was 49 years old that that dream began to unfold. And I began to see all the images in Cameroon that I seen when I was a child. So I'm working on that book. And Cameroon really has my heart. Cameroon, second is Angola for the food, Congo because my DNA is there, and South Africa just because I love South Africa.
Well, you have to come back. You have to come back to South Africa. Ahmed, as you are working on your new...
Yeah, the last time I was there was in 2018.
Ahmed, as you are working on this new story about Hamlet, and we know we've spoken about the Arab Spring, we think that this kind of spring is happening in so many different parts of the world. I mean, right now in South Africa, with lockdown, we have a huge concern about, you know, monies that should have gone for PPEs or gone to help people are being used, and there's so much corruption and there's all this confusion and anger. How have things changed in Egypt post the Arab Spring, and has that influenced your work? And as we go into lockdown and COVID, is there some kind of mixture of all of that?
I mean, the kind of, I was involved in a film that I co-wrote during the revolution, about the revolution. And now looking back to that film, I think it feels already kind of dated, because as the events unravel, I think we need to wait a few years. And, you know, except if it's a documentary, it's different, you know, but if it's fiction. So I mean, I think the projects that I'm involved now are not necessarily about the current events, but I think they are more about criticizing things in the society, how women are perceived, the patriarchy, how religion is handled or dealt with in our society, and issues like that. So I try not to get into current political events, even Hamlet, this new project Hamlet, it's a Hamlet adaptation. It's set in an informal settlement, but I think there are also a lot of politics in it, but in a very indirect way. It's not about the current events per se, but everything in that film can be metaphorical about the situation of what's happening now. It's a project that it's very anti-patriarchal. How those kind of urban renewal that it's happening now in Egypt, because it's a very aggressive urban renewal. There are neighborhoods that have been completely torn. People have lost their homes. Yes, they are moved to new neighborhoods, but most of the time when they are relocated to the new neighborhoods, that's very far from where they work. It's very far from their jobs. They don't have the livelihood that they had in the old neighborhoods. So we try to tackle the current situation in a different way, not directly.
Yeah. Mara, I'm interested with your storytelling, and especially for children. Have you worked on anything regarding COVID, just to explain it? And I ask because we've actually just started producing some animations for children. And I find that we forget to talk to children when these things happen. Are you doing anything especially for kids?
I'm not doing anything just now, but a couple of months ago, I wrote a poem, actually. Can I remember it? So don't ask, I can't, so don't ask me. Yes, it was called The Corona King. And I had kind of created, I had personalized the coronavirus. And it was, like a force that was coming and attacking. And it was basically just sort of looking, just at how, because I guess at different times during lockdown, people were responding to things very differently. I think in moments of crisis, people are forced to come together in a lot of ways. And then also in the media, we saw a lot of reports of things that were happening that really, gained a lot of compassion and empathy from people around the world. For example, the woman who was cooking stones for her children in Kenya. I'm not sure if anybody saw that particular story, but it really, it captured the hearts and the spirits of a lot of people. But with all of this, talk of, this COVID is going to change the world and we're going to come out of this anew and we're going to come out of it afresh. But there was still this thing of, well, actually, are we? Or do things just go back to being the way they were? So it was a poem that kind of raised a lot of questions, but it was done in a way that was, I have two children. I have a 13-year-old and a 6-year-old, and they were able to understand it at their level, and also it resonated with a lot of adults as well. So yes, I think you can discuss a lot of things for children. And yes, so this poem, it kind of went around on social media, and it was picked up here in Scotland anyway on some of the media. So it circulated a little bit, but yes, I'm not focusing on anything specific just now.
Okay. So Justine found your one of your songs, Peggy, and we're going to show that on YouTube, from YouTube.
That's it.
सबका मान महाबंदी साथी सुन साथी सुन साथी सुन 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 सबका फरमान सब खड़ी कैद हो जाओ महामारी है
ना कोई भात ना कोई रोटी साथी चल साथी चल साथी चल 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 ना कोनो खाइका असगरो भूखी भूख जीना मुश्किल है आइजा विदेशी हम सफर
साथी चल साथी चल साथी चल चल चल
आइजा विदेशी जिए से जाएंगे
रास्ता लंबा है
कर थम ना जाए हमरा बनवास
अलविदा प्यारे ओ प्यारे अलविदा
बनवास से हमने जे कभी लौटी न
Thank you. Thank you. That was lovely. So Peggy, when you write the lyrics, are you doing the lyrics and the music to it, or who are the people who work with you? How do you do it?
Oh, well, first of all, that's a known tune. Everybody was into Bella Ciao, and people who were protesting against the government here were doing their versions of it. So I thought I'd do my version. Music, I did the guitar, and my nephew recorded us. But basically, with most things, I'm able to do enough of them myself. So it's easy. The idea was to keep shrinking back from film, which required so many people's participation and so much support, to something that was a little world that was my size, where I knew I had much more creative control. So if I can do the guitar or I can do the piano on it, it's great. And if I can write the lyrics, and like we write lyrics in lots of languages and in the process learn them. We just done a song in Punjabi and I didn't really know Punjabi before. So we're picking it up. It's a journey.
That's
and to not be
wonderful.
afraid.
It's absolutely wonderful. What a treasure. So usually when we come to the end of the show, I ask everybody to tell me what F means to them, because the show is the F show, and F is for my name, which is Firdaus.
Okay.
And Ahmed, you do know what Firdaus means, right? Jannatul Firdaus.
Yes.
Yes, which is paradise. That's who I am.
Yeah.
So Mara.
Also a name of a beautiful blue stone.
As well.
Yes.
So Mara, what would F be for you?
I'm going to say fire, because fire has this magical quality. When you look at it and you see the burning embers and you hear the crackle, there's something very warming and very inviting and very uniting about fire. Yet at the same time, it has incredible capacity for destruction. So it's beauty and destruction in a balance.
Wow, thank you. You see.
Those for me, the F means free. As I'm free to do and say and write whatever I like now. Whereas a few years ago, we weren't free to do anything. Yeah, we were limited to what we could do. So I'm free now to just say and speak what I want to. And I'm loving it. And I feel free right now.
Wonderful. Professor Anita? I think you're on mute.
Mute.
You took my word, but I'm going to extend it to freedom, the act of and being involved in total freedom, free in mind, free in body, free in spirit. Even though we're in quarantine and under lockdown, we still can find our freedom inside of ourselves, freedom inside our homes, freedom in our backyards, freedom with our family, freedom. That's what I
Thank you.
Of the F word.
Ahmed?
I mean, I use very often the word flow in my work, because, for me, storytelling and telling a story in a film is all about flowing from one scene to the next, flowing one sequence to the next. And I use that word very often. That's the first word that came to my mind.
Flow. And Peggy?
Flow.
Actually wondered about it, and I thought, first I looked and saw, oh yes, we do have two men, but I thought female in a very different sense, the sense in which I've used it in my last book, which is that there's an inner side to everything. If you look at a language, all the words come from the men who have migrated through India, but what can't go, or just like what can't go in the South African language, is the clicks, which come from women far, far long ago who may have lost their own words, but there's something of their structure that remains. So it's a hidden inner structure. So female.
Wow, that's wonderful. So I want to thank you all for being so generous with your story, with your talent, with sharing, because when we have these conversations, we're in the Zoom and then we go on to Facebook Live, and the idea is for people to just get a pinch and a pick of different things and then hopefully be inspired by the work that you are doing. So I thank you so very, very much for coming to us today. Some of us are in daylight, some of us are almost midnight or beyond midnight.
Beyond midnight.
Beyond midnight. So Peggy, I thank you so much for staying awake. And then Anita for starting the day with us. And it's been an absolute pleasure. Is there a last message or word I can go around, and we can start with you, C, that you may want to say in closing?
So just thank you very much for having me. And it was just so interesting hearing everybody's stories from around the world. I just want to thank you for that, Fidos. And I just want to say, keep on doing what you're doing. I find each and every one of you very interesting. And thanks for giving me this opportunity to meet all these people. And stay well, stay safe.
Thank you. Ahmed?
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. And I'll definitely keep following your work. And yeah, good luck. And let's hope coronavirus ends soon, so we can all see loved ones, be able to travel, and be able to vote as well in the upcoming US elections.
Yes.
Anita, how do you feel about that, the US elections? You know, the whole world, and I keep saying Americans don't realize that the entire world watches that election, and it's almost as if we are all part of it.
Yes, yes. I'll be glad for the day after. I'll just be glad for the day after, so we can start a new chapter with whoever the new president is going to be. We're just ready for a new change. And I want to thank you for bringing me on the show. I believe I met some wonderful people here today, and that I hope that we all can stay in touch with one another.
Thank you. Peggy?
Oh, I can't really think of anything general like that, but I do remember something that Anita said that resonated very well, which was that when she went back to Africa, she was able to show them things that they had forgotten, and that somehow a link came that way. And it's something that I find happening at times, but we're always surprised that in a way, it's not just that Africa has it and the world doesn't, or India had it, that some of us who went abroad have preserved a few things. And it's a nice thought that they can connect again.
Mara, dearest Mara.
I'm going to say the word stop. And the reason for this is because you were asking earlier about children. And stop is a word that I use with the children. I've always used it when we have our nightly prayers. And I'm not a religious person by any stretch, but we have this ritual. And stop is, we start off with a prayer that is sorry. So we are asking for, you know, just reflection on things that we haven't done or could have done better. Then T is for thank you. So gratitude for the little things that come our way. O is for others. So for me, it has been a pleasure to meet everybody here. And then P is for please. So, you know, it's been such a wonderful thing. I'm so thankful for it. So please, you know, continue to do it, everybody. Continue to do your work. And for those, yeah, I look forward to more conversations, listening to other guests on the show. So thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you so very much.